This is a Merrick Studios podcast. On this episode of Working Title,
a lot of people don't have the tremendous drive that it takes to do things in the entertainment industry, whether it's acting, whether it's directing, whether it's writing, you name it, right? Like it takes tremendous drive because people are telling you no all the time.
I'm Bun B. I'm a host and a co-owner at Merrick Studios, and we just took things to the next level. Merrick Studios Plus is live, so tap in at wearemerrickstudios.com, get 65% off, and don't just listen, be a part of the show.
Every movie starts the same way: an idea, words on a page, a maybe. Most of them never make it any further. I'm Mark Elias, writer, producer, actor, director, and this is Working Title from Paper to Screen. All right, my guest today is Frank Hanna, screenwriter and storyteller who's worked across both original features and big IP worlds. I wanted Frank for this episode because this is the phase where your project stops being imaginary. You've got a first draft, which means you've got something to shape, but also something to protect. Today is about what happens after draft one. Who you go to for notes, how you evaluate the script before anyone else reads it, how to tell which notes are legit and which ones are noise, and how a director might look at a script differently, or even in another way than how a writer does. I'm going to do that part again. Today's about what happens after draft one, who you go to for notes, how you evaluate the script before anyone else reads it, how to tell which notes are legit and which ones are noise, and how a director might look at a script differently than a writer does. Frank, thank you for being here.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Okay. Before we jump into the craft side, can you tell us a little bit about your background, like where you grew up and what first pulled you towards storytelling?
Well, that's a big question. I was born in Scotland, but I grew up in Southern California and in the South Bay area. And I think my storytelling came from what would probably be kind of a Scottish tradition of storytelling, where people would just kind of tell you about their day, but they would tell you in a humorous or entertaining way. So that kind of laid the groundwork for me to see things in terms of story. So if my father would come home after having some humorous or some strange interaction with somebody, he would tell the story and usually make himself like the butt of the joke. And it made it really entertaining. So then I realized that what I would do is I would tell my own stories about what happened to me. And then that kind of just built out from there. And now I look at that as something I like to call marketing your misery, right? It's like you have this way where you're able to piss and moan about your day, but you do it in such an entertaining way that nobody knows that you were just venting. They just think, oh, that guy's really funny, as opposed to, oh, he's that guy that just sucks the oxygen out of the room. So that's kind of where it started. And of course, then when you think about like movies and TV and it just always kind of captured my imagination. And I think I really also looked at it from as an escape when I was younger. And I think that, kind of something I realized too was that when I was in my early 20s, anytime somebody asked me a question, I didn't have any life experience, but what I did have is I could say, oh, did you see that episode of MASH? Or, did you see that episode of this? And it would explain a similar situation or circumstance. And so that's kind of where like the TV kind of raised me, right? Or the movies kind of raised me. So it's once you start actually having your own living kind of responses, then you draw from that. But that was really a big part of where I drew a lot of my knowledge and answers for things. So it just seemed like a logical jump that I would decide to want to write stories and work out my problems that way. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I actually never knew that about you, but that's crazy. And then I think we've actually discussed this like before, just in conversation. But was there one moment where writing or filmmaking stopped being something that you loved and thought about and became something you're like, I'm going to do professionally? Like
I
one
think,
moment.
I think there was a moment, there's a couple of like milestone moments where I always kind of knew I wanted to be a writer of some kind when I was younger. I didn't know what kind. And then I knew, I remember thinking that there was a possibility that, hey, I love movies. Why wouldn't I just write movies? That would be the thing to do. As if that's just like, do that and then someone will let you do that. But it was like that kind of chocolate and peanut butter connection. And that was something that was like a key moment to me. But I think the thing that was more important than saying I wanted to do it professionally is getting to the point where I knew that it was the difference between if and when, I think, which is a big psychological uh, component to if this is ever going to happen, to when is it going to happen, because I know I have the wherewithal. And I think that came to me um, in 97. I started writing seriously and I entered a script into the Nichols Fellowship, which is the uh, writing competition they do every year. It's part of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. And it's kind of the one that is known to be kind of legit. Like there's a lot of them out there where you pay money and you send your script and then, maybe you get some interest. But this is the one that I knew that if somebody was reading that, then they go through a process of where one person reads it. If they like it, they give it to another person. If they like it, then, it advances. And so the point is, with that script, I got into the semifinals, which was like the top 100 out of 5,000 scripts.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know that meant I was a great anything, but what it did tell me was that I could do this, and people other than your mom and your best friend telling you how great you um, uh, are saying, "Hey, this is worth a read." So that was a huge thing, because while that didn't get me a, a, a sold movie, it didn't. What it did do is make me realize, okay, I'm on to something. So I think that's kind of the more important switch for me. It's kind of the long roundabout way of asking
Okay, yeah.
or
And
answering that question.
for people that don't know, Frank, I mean, the first thing I knew about you was I was watching a movie when I was a kid back home, and it was a movie that was called The Cooler, which had
Ah,
William
you
H.
were a
Macy.
kid? Oh my
And
God, I'm old.
well, we'll just say I was still living in Philadelphia. And it was and Frank. I Over time, it's Frank Hanna wrote The Cooler, which was in Sundance, and William H. Macy was amazing in it. And now, um, Frank has now written an action and thriller, big budget movie called Alphas. Do we know when that's coming out?
I don't, although I have seen a version of it with about 85% of the effects done, because a lot of it's CGI. It's whales and sharks fighting underwater, and when you're waiting for that, like that just takes the time. Everything else, I've seen it a million times without any effects, but now we're getting to the wire. So I don't know when it'll be released, but what I do know is everyone um, at XYZ, who's the the studio, um, they're all very happy, and we all seem very happy. And what I've seen is fantastic. So fingers crossed, because you never really
Nice.
know with this type of thing. But yeah, so we'll see. And I have another film that's supposed to start shooting next month, um, called Princess, which is kind of a rom-com about a bulldog that gets in the way of a romantic relationship.
I
So
love
yeah,
that.
I kind of cast a wide net, because you kind of have to in this day and age. You can't, stick to one little type of genre and hope for the
And
best. So
this is amazing. Little known fact that don't think I've ever even told you is like, since we've met, I've unofficially been telling people that you're my writing mentor. So, you know,
Really?
yeah,
I thought writing mentees had to listen to what I say.
that's a
Does
good
that
point.
technically mean you're I'm a mentor?
Yeah, or I'm a bad student. I'm not sure which.
Oh no, okay. No,
Um,
you are you have I have mentored you quite a bit over the last few years that we've known each other, um and part of that, why that's continued, I think, is because, and I think I've said this to you, is because you know a lot of people don't have the tremendous drive that it takes to do things in the entertainment industry, whether it's acting, whether it's directing, whether it's writing, you name it, right? Like it takes tremendous drive because people are telling you no all the time. And one of the things I saw in you, even though as a writer, maybe you had things that you wanted to achieve or you wanted to learn things, what I did sense from you is this willingness to stick it out and do it, which I think is such a winning formula because most people, you say, oh, this is what you need to do, and they don't. Or you say, hey, how's the writing going that you've been working on with them? And they say, oh, I haven't had time to do any writing. And you kind of realize, wow, if you aren't drawn to the desk to type and write, or however it is you do it, um, it's just hard enough as it is without, it's hard enough with like an immense need to sit down and do it. And I felt like you had the kind of drive doing all the other things in independent film and uh, making movies yourself. Like that doesn't just happen by accident. Like I don't think you do that and wake up one day and go, "Wow, I have this movie." It's like no, what you've needed to do that is you know a massive effort. And so when I saw that, I thought, okay, this is a guy that's serious, that wants to do the best he can and is willing to do the work. So that's kind of the thing that made me kind of say, this is a guy worth uh, investing my time in.
oh, that's amazing. Well, thanks. I hope I can pay it off.
We'll see.
All right. Let's jump into the phase that every writer eventually hits. You finish draft number one, you sit back, and then that terrifying thought hits. Okay, now what? So when you
Right.
finish a first draft, what should draft one be in your mind? Like what is it for?
I think uh, it's just the beginning. I mean, there are a lot of people that teach writing or write will say, "Oh, the first draft is where I just vomit out everything and onto the page." And while that's true, I think it's more than that because that kind of almost devalues the process because what you're putting down is the best of what you think you have in your head at first, and then but really the point is um, when you hear people say writing is rewriting, it really is like it's where you say it's time to start now. And then the question then you may ask is, well, what does that mean? What is the starting now? If because the idea that you've written an entire script and wrote the end, even a first draft, you're already 99% further along than most people that want to be
Yeah.
say they want to be writers. You've done
Yeah.
that thing. So in your mind, you're thinking, well, that's it. It's done. There it is. It's like, well, no, you go back in it and you look to see what works and what doesn't. Because really, if you don't have a kind of journey for your characters, really all you have is a bunch of things that happen one thing after another without it actually adding up to anything. And I think while sometimes that kind of feels like it works because it's just an action movie or it's a thriller and it's just you don't really have a chance to stop and go, well, what does this even mean? I think for people to really connect with a story you've written, They need to have some kind of emotional and part of that comes from the actual inner journey of your characters and what makes them relatable and what the problem is. And what you've heard me say a bunch of times, Mark, is this kind of idea like, what is the complication? What the complication of the story, meaning what is the thing that not only drives it forward in a way that's understandable for the audience or a reader in terms of what is going to happen or what you would assume is going to happen next, and also more importantly, what's at stake for the character. So you should know in a complication what is at stake, why, like what they need to do, but what is at stake for them in achieving it or what might happen. And I think that is the work of rewrites. And so the first draft is great, and then you're going to go back after and you're going to look at how the story tracks and see if it actually is adding up the way you thought it would. Because many times what you'll find is if you're not too rigid, you'll find that you thought you wanted to write this one thematic part of a story or have this one thematic arc, and what you realize is you've written an entirely different one and you don't see it until it's done and you go, oh. So then what you would probably need to do is say, oh, if this is a redemption storyline or if this is learning to let go or whatever theme is there, then you can go and build to that. Because then you could say, hey, this is kind of what I think my character is doing or is where they're heading, but I haven't really built that, what leads up to that. Or you haven't built in the scenes that make the character really earn or make the choice they make at the end. Like if it's about letting go, the short version of that would be that by the time you're finished, you should be able to point back to the script you wrote to see all of the ways that holding on was good and bad for the character, and also what was good and bad about letting go. And ultimately, so that when the character does make that choice, the audience knows without really thinking about it too much that, oh yeah, this is what the journey was. Yeah, he was there earlier and he holding on meant he got to still have a relationship with his ex-wife's stepson or something or friend or whatever. But then letting go means that's, so the back and forth of it all adds up to something. But if it doesn't, and they just make a decision at the end, it feels kind of like unearned and like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's what they would do. And maybe that's what the story calls for, but it doesn't feel earned. And it feels like somebody just made the choice to end the film because that's the thing. And I think that like a lot of movies are like that, not good movies, but a lot of movies are like that. But the ones that do achieve the kind of thematic goals of the character in the story are the ones that make you go, oh, wow, that was so good, because you were kind of on the emotional journey of it. I know that's maybe getting ahead of myself, but that's kind of my thought process.
And we'll be right back.
Welcome to Merrick Studios, where stories take the mic and culture comes alive.
We're not just a network, we're family, bringing you smart, soulful, unfiltered conversations.
And this season, we're bringing the heat with our biggest lineup yet. Whatever you're into, music, sports, business, we got you covered.
Merrick Studios, where the conversation starts and keeps going.
Check out our full lineup, including Unglossy with Bun B, Jeffrey Sledge, and myself, Tom Frank. Now streaming at wearemerrickstudios.com.
Master the art of lyricism with Pendulum Mink, the first school for rap. Learn elite techniques through immersive lessons, real-world exercises, and guidance from hip-hop icons. This is where MCs sharpen their skills and glow boldly on the mic. Ready to level up? Visit pendulummink.com and start your journey today.
And now, back to the show.
And then like once you're ready to show it to somebody and this is something that like I feel like I've learned over time, and I'm still in that discovery phase, is like, who are the first people that you go to for notes, and like what do you want from them? Because I made the mistake before of just like, oh, here's somebody smart I know that's in the entertainment industry, and then you get notes and you have to learn over time that it's like they're not necessarily I feel like there needs to be a certain thing that you go to people for, or you have to really trust them on like a high intellect level that they're going to say like, oh, this isn't a movie that like I would like, but like this is how you adjust the notes. This is a helpful note versus being like, they give you like, well, there's no aliens in it. And you're like, I mean, it's not an alien movie. So why, you know, you get like kind of out of nowhere. And so that's a long winded way of asking like, how do you assess that? How do you go to what do you want from each person you go to?
Well, I think there, it's. I think you want honesty from people, but I think you, as you say, like if you give it to somebody that you know, like, well, they're a smart person, but maybe this isn't really their sensibility. They may not know what or where this is, like what you're trying to achieve with it. So you have to be willing to kind of know what your vision is and be able to defend it, but also be open to say, oh, okay, they saw something I didn't see. So really, the most important thing is you find somebody who will be honest with you, but and it's a hard thing because not getting constructive criticism means you're like Emily Dickinson and you're writing a bunch of stuff that people find after you're dead. But if you are willing to get people to give you the information and you have to take an honest look at yourself and say, yeah, you know what? They called me out on the one thing I knew was wrong about the script. And I will tell people that sometimes whenever they read my drafts and they'll go, you know, the character here. And I'd say, you know what? You hit on the one thing I was not really 100% about. So, but also understanding that they have an opinion um, and that you want honesty, but you have to also understand that nobody will match your enthusiasm for something, whether it's a script you wrote or any kind of creative endeavor. They're never going to match your enthusiasm for your vision of it. And if they do match your enthusiasm, there's a good chance it's really just the parallel universe in which your story lives in their brain, not in the one that we're all
Yeah.
living in. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they might be excited, but they're really looking at like this. And a perfect example of this is, Mark, a lot of times whenever you might have sent a script or an idea to me, and then I'll say, here's where I thought you were going to go with that. Or I'll say, here's an example of what I would do. And of course, I'm really excited about what I would do because now I'm in this parallel universe. I'm trying to help you, but really my excitement is for my reaction to my thoughts on it. So the point of that is that person may have amazing ideas and you may say, that's great. I love that. But then also, you need to be aware that, if you have a very specific vision for what you're doing, you need to be able to separate out the nuts and bolts issues that a story may have and understanding what is essentially a taste or tone, difference.
Sure.
Somebody may have a very different sense of humor. They may have a different tone they think the story is going, and then they're pushing that on you, which really has nothing to do with, say, the ultimate vision of what you're trying to write. So it takes time. I think the most important thing is just being willing to have somebody look at the stuff and people specifically, that aren't going to be so negative that it's going to be disheartening, but somebody who is not going to, go, oh, this is fantastic, because you don't want that. If you want to get better, you really want people to point out the things that you're doing that aren't working. And I think over time you realize that that happens a lot, right? And it doesn't matter what stage of writing you're at. There are people that will tell you, like I have people that will tell me when I'm writing something and my dialogue is too on the nose, or I'm speaking out loud what really needs to be hidden, and I do that because when I'm writing in a rush, it's almost like placeholder. I know this is what I think is supposed to happen in this scene, but then later on, someone goes, why are they saying exactly what's going on? And you go, oh, right. So then you go and you rewrite it so that uh, you're achieving your same goal without it being like hit over the head. The audience isn't getting bludgeoned with it. So, but the point is, it's an ongoing thing, and understanding the differences between your style and just nuts and bolts mechanics of what makes a good story and what doesn't. It's just a process.
Yeah, I definitely feel like one thing I've noticed before is sometimes when you get a note on something, I'm not sure if you've had this experience, but like sometimes it's that they give you a note and you're like, this scene makes so much sense. And then you kind of you realize over time that it's something that happened right before tripped them up and they didn't know why. And then you get a note on scene 43 when really the issue that pulled them out was in 42 and they didn't know how to say that. And so they kind of,
Right.
you have to backtrack it. And another thing I found, and I don't know if you felt this too, is like the best notes is when somebody is like, this is what you could do in this moment instead. And it's like they're almost presenting solutions instead of like those times where you get like these like, well, this isn't good enough or this isn't good enough. And you get this sort of like bitter feeling from the other end of the person who's like kind of like I pick up like, is there like a conflict here between us that's like making these notes weird, or like how
Oh yeah.
negative versus constructive people can be when helping out,
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think that's a huge problem that people have, because they'll respond in a way, and it's not about the thing you think it's about. And I'm not saying that it's personal, but yeah, I mean, it's one of the toughest things that we have to deal with in the entertainment industry, is that this is a collaborative medium, right? And that
Yeah.
people all have to have their say, and that's kind of how it should be. But having your say and having like a completely different vision of what things should be is not helpful. But it feels like people all like, I look at it like in writing, people say when they're trying to write a villain, a piece of advice is to say that like the villain is the hero of their own story. So you have to find ways to make them like, you want to actually, even though they're doing something evil or doing something bad, you really want to get behind the reasons why they're doing it and say, well, no, I don't agree, but I understand it. Like I could see why. And so producers and people that kind of make things difficult in the collaborative process, like they're the hero of their own story too. Like, they think they're doing what is the best for the project, and it may or may not be. But part of it is that if boats are going in opposite directions, then it doesn't matter what anyone says or does. So, I think, to get back to what you're kind of saying, is that the way I give notes to people is the way I wanted notes given to me when I first got them. Because I would just get like, you missed the boat. That's all you get. Like, you missed the boat entirely. Or this beggars belief. I can't believe you. And it's like, yeah, well, that's fine. But tell me, you say, what specifically? And they go, it's just overall. And so you're like, well, I can't fix that. So what I try to do is I'll say, and as you know, I'll say, okay, look, this is what is maybe missing, or this is what I'm thinking might be useful to you. And then I'll say, like, for example, and then I'll give you an example of what it is. And I'll say, you don't have to use this, but this is me showing you the logic of how I come to something, or how I would come to solve this problem. And in your mind, because I'm conscious of the parallel universe we talked about, where everything is great in my head, is I want people to reach that in their own mind. So they really need to know the process of what and how I do that. And so I do give examples because then I'm hoping that makes it much more easy for someone to see what it is I'm trying to get across.
Amazing. Yeah. That's I feel like that's so valuable when somebody's like, "Hey, I see what you're trying to do," and you go, "Oh, okay." So then we're on the same page.
Mhm.
So if I'm sitting here now, I've got draft one of Week of the Heroes written and notes are starting to come in. What's the best like 7-day plan to really turn feedback into forward motion? I mean, do you have like, what would a 7-day plan be? And what would you do if two smart people gave you opposite notes? Is there like, what would that plan be for 7 days to get this thing on the next phase?
Well, I think there's a couple questions in there. I'll take the second one first. If you have two people giving opposite notes on the script, the only thing you can do is, well, I think the thing you should do, uh, is sometimes you may go, oh, well, we know we don't really care what this person says, but we really trust this person. Or the person says, don't worry about what that person says. And that sounds kind of horrible, but that happens daily. Short of that, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you get everyone together and you say, look, what is the vision here that we're talking about? Like we're at odds here. We if there's somebody who's involved in the project, if they're just somebody who gave you notes, um, if they're involved, then you need to make sure you can get everybody getting the boat in the same direction. If it's just
Right.
opposing notes that both sound compelling, but you're not really sure which one to go with, which happens too, is that you really then have to look deeper at what it is your story's trying to tell the world. Like, what is the thematic element? You know, if 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 you're looking at something like Raiders of the Lost Ark, um, which the only way to describe that movie thematically is impressive failure, right? At every turn, everything gets taken away from Indiana Jones, everything. Even right up to the end when he returns the ark, gives it to the government, and then it's taken away from him and shoved into a huge warehouse. Like he gets nothing. And so if somebody gives a note that says, oh, I think he should be able to get it and take it and do all this, do all that. Well, that's fine. I mean, it may sound good, right? We all may even want that, but that's thematically not what this story is about. So that would be
Yeah.
the way to kind of first look at that, is to say, okay, is this something that is important thematically to my story? Does it make that work or not? And if it doesn't, then you would just say, look, it's not a bad note, but it doesn't really match what I'm trying to do. So that
Sure.
kind of answers that question, I think. In terms of a 7-day, uh, that's quite a tidy schedule. But I think more than anything, it's kind of an extension of what I just said. Is that you look at the notes and you have to see what really rings true for you, right? Because they're going to be the things that you get notes from people and you say, yep, totally, totally get that. Totally excited to actually make that change because it solves a problem maybe I was struggling with. And other times it's just about saying, okay, uh, sometimes it's not an option that you um, can take or not. Like sometimes maybe it's like, we want this. And you go, oh, I don't know how I can give you that. And so then that note is something that is a problem that you have to solve. So then that's where time um, uh, can take over, because you're trying to find a solution. It's not a matter of just implementing changes that they've handed to you, like cut X amount of pages, or write more for this character, or things like that. Or we need a car chase, or we need this, or we need that. Sometimes it's something that is fundamentally changes everything, and you don't have the option to say, I'm not doing that. So then you have to find a way to make it work. And the only way to do that is to look at the arc of the character, and also look at what the actual physical goal is of your story, and see if those things line up, or if they are in like track with that type of part of your story. Which it's hard sometimes, because maybe your story's not just a straight up the middle thing where you realize, oh, I need to get from point A to point B, and how I get there could be any number of ways. Um, So really, I think it's just looking at what the ultimate blueprint or goal is for any given story in terms of your character's inner needs and wants and the outer goals of the story, and then seeing if the notes that are being handed to you, if you have an option to say, yeah, that doesn't work, so I'm just going to set that aside, or if it's something that like you're being told, hey, this is what we need, you need to be able to look at it and say, okay, if this is what you want, then now we're in a situation where the whole thematic drive of this story has to change, which means you want to change this one part, but it's going to mean that all of this has to change. And if that's the case, then you have to get on board with people and say, all right, well, here we are. And then, we go from there. However, that all sounds crazy, but a lot of times if it's just notes you have yourself, or it's notes that are coming to you from a producing team or people or actors or people that have a vested interest in your project, you really then once you've gone over those kind of key points with story and theme and plot, then you would write something out summarizing the changes that you would make and send those to the people and say, here's what I'm doing. Because God knows if you do it, they're going to come back and go, what? Why did you do that? Nobody told you to do that. Who told you to do that? And you say, oh, well, okay. So you really are trying to save yourself the hassle by getting some kind of consensus or buy-in as best you can from the people that you know. So I don't know. I think it's not kind of as cut and dried as like one ABC 1, 2, 3, but I do think that trying to honor the most important aspects of what your story is and what it's trying to tell and achieve are the best roadmap for any note, because it tells you if it is something that is of substance to your story, or if it's just sounds good but really does not play in the same sandbox.
I love that, dude. One thing I think I just took from all this too is that you have your kind of BS detector when you're writing, and you know when something is probably right and not. And then I think you have to use that same thing when getting notes sometimes and going, that's actually not a good note, and not just taking every note for law. Wow,
No, I
that's
think
crazy.
I think it's one of those things that there's no greater feeling when there's something you feel 100% about, and you make your case to the team that is engaging you, and they go, yeah, no, okay, you're right, and you go, okay, because then you realize that it's not about being right, it's about that, like, okay, so we're on the same page here about the vision of this,
Yeah,
and
totally.
that feels great. Uh, because sometimes stories don't come easy, and solutions are very difficult to find, that because you're never going to please everybody.
One more quick question. What is the most common useless note that you get? When you see it and you're just like, I mean, really? Like, scratch that,
Geez, there's a long list of those.
The
But what
most common.
I've gotten recently, which kind of cracks me up, is I get notes that say things like, yeah, I don't think the character would say that. And then I think to myself, really? The character I've created out of whole cloth that I've made up in my head, like, how do you know what they would say, right? Like, it's my character. Of course, they say what they say, So when I get
Yeah.
notes like that, I'm like, okay, you don't like what they say. But that doesn't mean that it's not what they would say. So and I think that's kind of subjective, but it does kind of get under my skin a little bit, because I've lived with those characters in my head. I hear them talking all the time. I know exactly what they would say. And when I
Yes.
write it and they go, yeah, I wouldn't say that. So that's annoying, but that's really small problem, because generally you just change it to make somebody happy because you have bigger battles to wage, and this line
Sure.
or that line doesn't really kind of do it. But yeah, there's stuff like that. But I think also too is that when you get a note that's like really vague, that's really tough. Where if somebody comes to you and says, listen, your complication isn't strong enough because I don't feel like what you have in your story is enough to drive your character to want to do what he or she needs to do to get to the end of the story. You go, oh, okay. And so then there's examples of that. But if someone just goes, it's yeah, I don't know, like it's just everything, it's like, well, that doesn't help. And that's not a good sign for your story either if they can't pinpoint what the problem is. But I think a lack of specificity, and also too, when you'll get notes that are clearly because the person didn't really read thoroughly the rewrite that you've given them. And it's something you've addressed or that you have, it's written right there, and they'll go, I don't understand this. Why is this here? And it's like, well, it's explained. Well, there's no mention of this. And I'm like, no, there is. It's here, here, and here. They're like, oh. And so it's just a waste of time because everyone's busy and they skim through changes and they don't, so look, the amount of annoying things that you can get told, it's just par for the course because, this is what we do. So,
yeah, that's amazing. Wow. Okay. So draft 1 is where you discover the movie. Notes are where you start building it. Frank, this was incredibly helpful. Thank you so much for walking us through the process and, giving us a look at how you think about rewrites and feedback. This is amazing. If you're following along with the progress of our We Could Be Heroes project and you've got questions about this stage, like rewrites, notes, or how to decide what feedback to act on, send them our way. We'd love to incorporate some of those into the future episodes. And next time, we're going to talk about what happens when the script is finally ready to leave your laptop and go into the world, the process of sharing it, getting it in front of the right people, and what the next step actually looks like. Franks, thank you so much again for being here. This is amazing.
You're welcome. My pleasure.